Good day and welcome to Quilting with Don 2024, where I am continuing to make bursting forth. See the pattern here on the original pattern, what I'm doing with it. There we are. So, last episode, if you're just tuning in, I got through most of the repetitive grunt work of sewing together most of the triangles. In other words, all the triangles, but mostly completed. So, this is where I'm at now. My intent for this episode is to finish the top, at least up to the borders. Maybe not including the borders, we'll see how it goes. So I have been a little busy as usual because I want to make sure my methodology works for sewing together the pieces. So let me show you what I've done so far, and then I'll show you how I did it. Okay, so what you see here is what I've got so far, and that's the green and red triangles sewn together as triangles. So I'm going to show you how I did that working on the blues. I learned quite a bit doing that, including got to work on Y seams, those, in other words, seams that are in the shape of a Y, and also sewing with organza. So you can see to finish the lower triangle, I need to sew the piece with the organza onto the piece without. And it's a Y seam. Why? Because I'm going to sew along this edge here, and then along this edge here, and somehow everything is going to work out. Well, it's not exactly rocket science, but it is a little tricky. And you'll never guess who taught me how to do this. If you guessed Carolyn, you guessed right. So clearly, you got to sew one edge first. And my practice, what I've been working on is sewing the shorter one first. So you fold the goods to goods, and you line it up. And this is where I got to practice on quite a bit. It's going to line up right about there. So at a 1/4 inch, these two edges are going to line up. Now here's the fun part. You want to make sure you don't sew too far because you don't want to have the Y become unmanageable. So you mark a 1/4 inch along this seam here, which I'm doing there, and you mark a 1/4 inch along this seam here, right? I'm just eyeballing it, but I'm getting pretty good at marking this. And then here's where they intersect. So when I sew, I'm going to sew from here to there, and then backstitch. And then, after that's sewn, then you take the other, it's going to be pinned here, or it's going to be tacked down, then you're going to rotate up and sew from there up to there, and you'll see it works very well. As an example, where did I put it here? I did test it on the first blue, and look at that. Look at that. The point here is good. It's even. These things line up. It lines up here. It lines up there, and it lines up there. It's exactly what I wanted. And oddly enough, in this particular case, the organza doesn't look too bad at all, especially when you look at it head on. So that's what I'm doing. That's the technique. Now, while I got you here, also, I haven't sewn a blue one yet of the upper triangle. Here we are. But this one's dead easy, right? You flip goods to goods, like this, you line them up, and you sew along the edge there. The only thing I learned from experience doing it is that it's good to pin at a 1/4 inch through this seam here, and then you check to make sure that it comes through on this seam here. When you line up those two seams at a 1/4 inch, you're guaranteed to have your points show up. Like on this one. There we go. See, they show up pretty good there. All right, so I'm all set up to sew. I'm going to reline things up again. Oh, I should point out, I marked a 1/4 inch because that is what my seams have been. If you're sewing less than a 1/4 inch, you should mark the width of your seam to be consistent when you're doing your Y seams. So I did check, I'm using my 1/4 inch foot, and even though I eyeballed it pretty quickly, I did quickly measure it, and it is a 1/4 inch. The other thing I should point out before I start sewing is that if you hadn't noticed, and I'm sure you did, I'm using this wonderful Singer 99K sewing machine built in 1956. I love it. I just love everything about this machine. It does take a bit more of care and feeding, and it can be a little fussy, but I'm slowly getting used to its quirks. And there are some. But it works very well. So, I've just lined everything up. And now we sew. I'm being very careful to stop at the intersection point. So I'm going to hand crank till I get there. Well, there it is. Then with this machine, you push the slide all the way up, and then I'm back stitching. All right? A couple times. That locks that puppy in. Make sure the needle's up. And trim what we got. Now, the cool part is when you go to sew the next piece, all you got to do is move it over to like I showed you, so these 2 points line up. I'm going to pin them. Okay, this is one case I think pinning really makes sure that these things come out properly. So I'll pin them right there. And then what you do, if you've done it right, is everything will fold on itself. So this center piece here is going to fold in half, just like you're doing a miter corner, oddly enough. And it should work. And it feels good. Oddly enough, when you're doing this and you feel where everything folds, it should be darn close to where you stop sewing. I could feel where the stitches are, and it's perfect. So now I just got to put this baby in the machine and sew it from where I marked it onwards along the larger length. The hardest part is to line up that mark with the needle. That's not that hard. Yeah, looks good. So I'll sew once, twice, back stitch it, and go forward. There we go. Remove the pin. Let's see how we did. There's the triangle. Nice point. Lines up with the Y, so it's a good, you can see the Y shape, right? You can see the Y. It's upside down right now. That point lines up. That point is good. Everything lines up left and right. So we're good. Now here's the back side. Flip. The way I iron these, oh, that one flipped up. The way I iron these is to have, for the most part, all the seams go wrap it around. So they nicely go all in the same around circular direction. But I discovered that when you're sewing down the Y seam here, that it really bunches up in one spot, 2 spots, here and here. So what I've decided to do is iron them open for these center seams, the second Y seam. And I'm doing the same thing for the upper triangles. That way when you sew them, it's going to have less of a knot when you start sewing these triangles together. And I think it'll make everything go better. So I shall carry on. I'll sew all the blue lower triangles, then I sew the blue upper triangles. Upper triangles are easy. Like I said, the only trick is to pin them so that the points line up. I'm going to share something with you that just made me laugh. So I'm sewing from piles, right? I've got the 2 shapes I'm sewing with from here. Well, I drew 2 pieces of fabric off this pile and 1 piece off that pile and sewed them all together. That didn't work because I'm checking my seam, my first seam, and then there's more flop going on than there should have been. So I just quickly unsewed it and now I'm going to sew it again. But that made me laugh. It's time. It's time to put together the pattern on the design wall behind me. Yes, I sewed all the pieces together. They all work great. Couple minor resews. I noticed that I had 2 more miscuts from the scan and cut, so I just had to unsew a bit, recut using the scan and cut, and resew. Not a big deal. All right, so let's put the design on the wall. You know what I'm building. Done the layup. So, as you can see, that looks pretty cool. It's going to take a bit of work. Looking at this pattern, I can see how I'm going to sew this now. I'm going to use the same process I used for Vista boxes, which was also, oddly enough, triangles. So I'm going to sew vertical rows of this pattern. Now, if you recall correctly, I am going to be putting a striped border that goes all the way around. So I still have to sew that. That's made out of 3 with the fabric reds plus black. That's my design, right? So how I'm going to sew this, actually, how I'm going to build this is as follows. I'm going to do the vertical rows, but at first I'm going to remove the outlying points, all right? And then I will sew this exactly as you see it. Making progress. I have sewn the first 3 rows of triangles. So if I step back, you can see what the unsewed side looks like. Now, these rows are not sewn together yet. They will be. But I'm going to finish this other side first. What I've learned so far on this is that triangles are straightforward as long as you line them up right. And lining them up right means being very precise on how all the various colors and shapes match. So there's I've been doing a lot of pinning. And I've had to do more than a few unsews. Well, I'm going to say 5 or 6 at least. And I don't have to usually undo the whole seam, but just to align some points. It takes just extra care. But you want it to be right, right? Also, when you do the edges, you want to make sure you have nice even edges so that when you sew them together, the rows together, they sew right. They sew properly. So I'm just going to keep plugging away at this. Probably got about 6 to 8 hours so far into these 3 rows-ish. I haven't really been measuring it. And I'll keep going and I'll show you after I put some rows together to see how they come out. Alright, I finished all the rows of triangles. Here you go. So my plan now is to start sewing these 6 rows together. So in other words, 5 seams have to be done. Few unsews as I went along, but nothing unmanageable. A couple times the points didn't quite line up right, and you know me, I want to make it right if I can. So, and I'm not afraid of using the magic seam ripper, well, the good old tried and true seam ripper. So, let's see how this goes. I am now going to pin the first 2 rows that you just saw from this pattern. And I think it's going to be fairly self-aligning, and here's why. Because you can see there's nice points for triangles. Here, the 60-degree triangles. There, 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 and there. So clearly my pin is going to run through the tip of each of those triangles. There's also self-aligning places, just like there were before, at the 1/4 inch mark for all of these other lines. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and the corners. So I'm going to use 17 pins. All right, I pinned it. 17 pins. This is one of the smaller sections. Longer sections will take more pins, obviously. And I've done my best to match up every place where the seams want to align. And I've looked at the back side to see that it's pretty good. Yeah, I've adjusted a couple. I might have to adjust a couple more, like that one right there. And thread broke. It does that once in a while when there's something weird going on. Yep. Let's fix it. All right, let's see how we did. I know for sure I got one unsewn because I could see where the fabric bunched. Let's see how we did. So far so good. All the points are lining up, looking good. I am a pinning god. I just got one unsew to do because somehow the fabric bunched and I can see where it did. So I've got to unsew about that far. And here you have it. My first 2 rows joined and it came out really well. It's not perfectly flat. I guess nature of the material, some of it's unbiased, some of it's not. But it's pretty good. And you can see as you scan along here that everything lines up. This is where I had to do the unsew. Oh boy, I may have to do it again. It's not lining up. Okay, one more unsew now that I'm looking at it, but we'll fix it. So there's only one area that I just could not make match, and it's that one right there. But it's gonna, you know what? It's gonna be close enough. Okay, the basic top is done. I haven't done the borders yet. You can see, though, the bursting forth concept with the multicolors and the bursting of the diamonds and the triangles. It's pretty cool. It was a bit of an adventure sewing those seams. A lot of pinning involved, which is okay. There's just the very last one I just couldn't get right. I re-sewed it 4 times and I didn't get it perfect. But I think at that point it's pretty close. It's going to have to do. So I'm very happy with this. The next thing, I'm going to walk over here. The next thing I'm going to do for the next episode is add on the points that I took off, if you recall. For example, this one to go there, somewhere around there, like that. And then there's 6 around. And then I'm going to add in these strips that I've already sewn here, right? So here's to, so far, our good progress. What I'm going to do now is make one of my favorite cocktails that is not martini, because I love the martini. And I'm going to make something the Canadians know, and that's a Caesar with clamato juice. But I'm going to make a special kind of Caesar that I learned about 30 years ago. It's with tequila. So you throw in a bit of crushed ice, shot of tequila, like so. I got this tequila actually given to me as a gift from Rob and Mary Lou, who go to Mexico every year. And then you add a bit of Tabasco sauce, a little bit of Worcester sauce, or Chestershire sauce, something like that. Bit of celery salt. And if you're really doing this fancy, you could salt the rim, but that's just a bit overkill. Some lemon juice. And then, of course, the key ingredient, clamato juice. Again, my Canadian friends don't know exactly what this is. American friends, it's like tomato juice, but not. It's made with clam juice, oddly enough, and it's really quite good. You're gonna go, ew, if you've never had it. You don't taste clams, it just tastes good. So there we have, oh, I got nothing to stir it with. We use this pen. There we have one tequila Caesar. So here's to happy sewing, happy quilting. Don't drink it so. That's good. Tequila Caesar. So stay tuned for the next episode when the borders go on. Cheers.